For the last time this year, welcome to Live with Lep. I'm Evan Lepler. Thanks for being with us this evening. 1 week until Christmas. We got a great lineup of guests over the next hour to talk a little Frisbee. Some news made earlier today in the Ultimate Frisbee Association. UltiWorld reporting that the Vegas Bighorns will be joining the league for 2025 as a member of the league's front office now. I can't confirm or deny other than to say, yeah, pretty cool. More information on that coming early in 2025. Our lineup tonight, leading off, the all-time leading goal scorer in UFA history, Cameron Brock of the Indy AlleyCats. Up second, we got John Randolph, I almost said AUDL, UFA champion with the New York Empire multiple times. Jacques Nissen of the DC Breeze will be our third guest. And then Joe Merrill of the Salt Lake Shred. Looking forward to catching up with Joe, see how he's doing after he got hurt late in the 2024 season. Without further ado, let's welcome in our first guest of the night, a guy that needs very little introduction. He's the co-host of the Swing Pass podcast. He has more goals than anybody else in the history of professional ultimate. That's not going to change anytime soon. Good evening, Cameron Brock. How are we doing tonight?
Doing all right. How are you?
I'm good, man. It's good to see you. What's life like these days as you head toward winter break of your teaching job and
Yeah,
life with the family back home?
good, good. Got a 4.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. So this is Christmas is gonna be busy, but I'm excited. Luckily get to stay home. And yeah, I got 2 more days of school this week, and then I've got 2 weeks off. So just looking forward to having that time off, being able to spend with family and keep training. It just gives me a little bit more options of when I can train throughout every day. So that's kind of nice. And yeah, it should be a good time. Although the weather's been kind of rainy and gross here recently. So I always say if it's gonna be cold, give me snow or give me nothing. I don't need the cold and the rain. That's kind of like the worst of everything.
How many days in December and January will you take off from training?
Combined, maybe 4.
I mean, these are the dog days of winter and holidays and everything. So,
No, like Christmas Day, we'll get up, we'll do presents. And then I'll probably go do like a 3-mile tempo run or something and before I come back and do more family stuff. So there's so this is kind of funny. The team really encouraged us to like write in this blog that we like had going on our website, and they just said, whatever you want to write about, just like write something and we'll put it up or whatever. And I had been thinking like, what do I want to write about? Like if I write something, and I decided to write an article about how people make a lot of excuses for whatever, insert thing here. But in particular, I think I got tired of so many times in the ultimate community, people complaining about like not achieving the results they wanted at the end of the year. And some of the people I knew personally, and I'm like, you're doing a lot of complaining, but I also know you did a lot of sitting around not making yourself better for most of the year. And I was like, all right, I thought I was going to get slammed by people. I thought people were just going to be like, oh, Cam, like, look at Cam over here, holier than thou, like with his, get off my lawn and go work out type mentality. I was just like, whatever, I'm going to write it. So I wrote it, and it was just like about all the excuses people make and how that's just what they are, their excuses. And I listed all the excuses I could make. I've got kids. I coached at the time. I was coaching 3 different sports in my middle school. I was running a club at the middle school. Obviously married. So I've got family commitments for my family, for my wife's family, like obviously all the daycare commitments and like play dates, I could list all of them. And I was like, and I still work out, 27, 28 days a month. And I find a way to make it work. And to my surprise, every person I ran into after writing that was like, dang, that article was awesome. It really motivated me to like get in the gym more. And I was like blown away. I remember I went to college nationals that year. I was in Cincinnati, and I had a teammate from AlleyCats who was playing the championship game. And while I was there, a guy from Oregon who was there working with one of the vendors, like he was a practice player for the Portland Nitro at the time, and comes up to me and is like, "Oh, I read your article and it really got me fired up." And I was just like, I don't know, it was really crazy. But I mean, I think a lot of people in general in sports skate by on their natural talents, and some, you know, some people can get away with that, but I think when you want to do it for a long period of time and be able to be, you know, excel over a long period of time, that doesn't come without work. Eventually, the natural talents start to fade, injuries start to happen, all those things start to happen because you're not taking care of yourself. So I try to make it a point to not make excuses. And if I ever feel like I'm about to make one, I try to get myself out the door before I have time to finish that thought. So,
Well, 644 goals, the numbers on the screen a second ago, and those yards are just since 2021. I was thinking about earlier, you know, we got three other prolific goal scorers, passers, all-star caliber players in John Randolph, Jacques Nissen, and Joe Merrill coming up. You could add up all of the goals that John, Jacques, and Joe have caught in the UFA. And then you add in all the goals that Bo Kittredge scored in his 80 career games. And then you add in all the goals that Jack Williams has scored in his 97 career games. And that total is 633 goals. Cam Brock has scored 644, currently 252 more than Ben Yacht, who's number 2 all time. Cam, what goes through your mind when you hear that perspective?
those are obviously a lot of great players that you named. I don't know, like I still think a lot about being that kid who first tried out and didn't even know if he's going to make the team, let alone have like impact on the field. And I know this is something that you've covered in broadcast before early on, in the earlier seasons, back when we were the AEDL, and that, you know, I almost didn't even play in college because when I was at Purdue, I was told I wasn't going to be good enough to make the team. So like, don't bother. I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is like way more intense than I thought. And, you know, I almost didn't go to tryouts for AlleyCats because I thought, there's no way I'm going to make it. And then, you know, it just all kind of started happening. And all of a sudden I was on the team. Then all of a sudden I was going to be on the O line. Then all, you know, it's just kind of crazy how it all developed. And I'm really thankful, honestly, more than anything, because I had lots of great teammates that kind of guided me and helped me get better. And really, you know, I like to think that there's other Cameron Brocks out there who play at smaller programs who didn't grow up in a Seattle or didn't go to a Carleton or a UNC. That if you take a chance on them, like they're gonna prove that you don't need to go that path to become an effective player. I think you just need to find somebody that's got a desire to get better and has got some natural athleticism and is willing to work really hard uh and willing to learn. I spent the first half of my seasons I've played so far just learning from other people and developing. So
We saw some footage from that first UFA championship game back in 2012 in Detroit against the Philly Spinners. You obviously played in championship weekend 5 years ago, 2019, with the AlleyCats. Every season of yours has been with the AlleyCats, and this is a franchise that's going through a transition right now with guys like Travis Carpenter and Levi Jacobs and Rick Gross and others stepping away. What does the future of the AlleyCats look like from your perspective as a guy who wants to still be successful both individually and collectively with this franchise that you've played with since the beginning?
Yeah, you know, this happens in sports all the time, right? Like you transition periods when someone great or multiple great players leave, and you have to kind of figure out what's the next step. You know, we elected captains a week or two ago, so like already kind of going through the leadership process, what that'll look like next year. I'm not gonna announce who those are. I will say I am not one of them. I did not want to be a captain. I'm leaving that up to some younger players to kind of take the lead on that. But it's just one of those things where it does present some holes, but it also presents great opportunity for some other people to step in. Um, we had some guys. I mean, you mentioned some names. You talked about my individual stats. I mean, a lot of those players have some pretty impressive stats to go along with their careers. And but one of the things that can also happen when you have a lot of changes like this is that it can create something new that is exciting and that works. And we've had some young players that we're excited about who might be able to take on some bigger roles, and some players that maybe have been playing defense for us that might get their chance to play some O and could infuse, an energy we haven't had before. So um, it's one of those things too, where just because we're losing these guys who have been really good for us doesn't mean that we can't actually be better next year. Because, you know, we're going to be a lot younger, and it's things are going to look different. Teams are going to have to really like scout the AlleyCats in a way that they haven't really had to in a long time, because it is going to be a bunch of different pieces. It's not going to be a known quantity like it's been for a number of years now. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the team looks like. And we got tryouts. AlleyCats have tryouts. I think it's like third week of January. So that'll be when things, I guess, start to take shape. But
I understand the Alley Cats are moving outdoors this year too, which will be a
yeah,
change.
back to Coon Stadium. And the first time I actually met you at a wildfire game. I mean, they were in town, and you and Megan Tormey were at Coon Stadium, I believe, when Brody Smith was still playing. I believe. Oh, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure. I feel pretty good about
I
that.
think the only game I've ever done in Indy was at the indoor facility.
I'm 95% sure that you did it. Yeah, Luke said you were there. I remember this. I met you on the field. There's actually footage somewhere I saw within the last year. I like resurfaced some of it as I was looking for some old footage. And you and Megan Tormey
It was a UFA Chicago Indy game?
in Indy. And then the next time I saw you after that was our game on ESPN3 that was in Chicago in 2014, the following season.
Yeah, no, I wasn't there. Chuck was there with Megan. I was not there. I
You
didn't
were there.
broadcast UFA games in
You were there.
2013. I swear I
Steel
wasn't there.
trap. Steel trap.
I promise you I was not there. 100%. Anyway, uh there are so many things we could discuss. I mean, like just to throw it out there cavalierly, you missed a game early in your career because you had a stroke,
Yeah,
which sounds super serious, but
sure.
clearly you're okay.
Yeah.
You retired in 2020 and then came back and just seemingly picked up right where you left off. All that stuff is in the past, and we did a great interview during the pandemic. Disc in a chat with Cameron Brock. It's on watchufa.com right now. Fans can read it, and it's a really fascinating conversation. I was just looking back at it. One thing you said in that conversation, Cam, your goal is to have a 97% completion percentage for a season. You were close last year,
It was.
closer than you've ever been. Not quite though. So maybe next year. The,
Yeah.
the difference thing that you and I haven't really talked about was you kind of, I know you were back in college for a time,
Hmm.
and you branched out with Adam Ruffner into the podcasting world, being a part of the UFA discourse. What was that like? What were the challenges of that maybe you didn't anticipate going into it?
Yeah, so I knew it was going to be a huge time commitment. But like I mean, it was just the schedule. I mean, trying to find time to talk about the weekend's games, but also give me enough time to catch up, especially on weekends where I played. So, I mean, I'm not even kidding when I say it. So, like, obviously, we didn't have any Friday games. So, like, Friday nights, I could watch those games, which was nice. But then Saturday night, I am not kidding when I say there were plenty of times where I would go straight from finishing a game, getting stretched, taking a quick shower at the facility. And then as I'm on my 45-minute drive home, I have the whatever most important West game that is like just started is like up, and I'm listening to it on the way home. And then I'm getting home and finishing watching that. And then when I wake up the next day, usually like heading to church, and after church, I get back. And while like my daughter's napping, I've got maybe even multiple games on my screen, so I can kind of like follow the game flow and look for important moments that I can reference in the podcast. And it was just It was a lot. And one thing I was most worried about that ended up not being an issue, unfortunately, is I was worried about like, man, what happens when I have to talk about AlleyCats on the pod? But we weren't really honestly that relevant last year, so I didn't have to do a lot of talking about the AlleyCats. And it was just one of those things where I reassured my teammates, like, look, if there's ever bad stuff about us, like I'm gonna fall on the sword. Like I'm never gonna throw any of you under the bus. If Adam wants to like throw somebody under the bus, I'll like he's more than welcome to do that, and I will entertain his thoughts. But I will always make sure like I'm not going to be the one to start the conversation about why someone made a mistake. But as I mentioned, we had sort of an up and down season last year, and didn't really become much of an issue. We spent a lot of time talking about a lot of other teams. But it was a lot of fun. It was just hard. And probably the hardest was when we were going through some issues in Indy and really struggling. It made me want to disengage with Ultimate Discourse because I was so frustrated with our struggles we were having that I didn't want to watch more. I didn't want to like go watch, the Salt Lake, Colorado game. I wanted to like sit around and just forget about Frisbee for the weekend, but I couldn't do that. So even on times where I wanted to get away, I wasn't able to get away. I needed to make sure I was so engaged with the content. That was probably the hardest part for me, kind of in that middle part of the season when we were really struggling to like stay engaged on a national level with everything that was going on.
Cam, I respect that you didn't throw your teammates under the bus. You threw me a little under the bus on Twitter earlier today by saying that you can't wait for the part of the show where, you and JR get to be on at the same time because, you can talk about all the times you've played each other and all the interactions you've definitely had previous to this one. We
Sure, sure.
welcome in John Randolph of the New York Empire. This is the moment you have been waiting for. John, thanks for joining us. Cam, I give you the honor of the first question to this UFA champion and college champion. What's something you want to know about John Randolph?
Ooh, okay. That's a great question. Now, if correct me if I'm wrong, you won college nationals and then like shortly after won with the Empire, right? Am I getting this timeline right there?
Yeah, one college in 2019, one with Empire not until 2022.
Okay, okay. So what what would you say was like the biggest difference between the intensity you faced in the college national championship game where you won versus the intensity of like championship weekend? What were some noticeable differences for you? And like which one, I think I know the answer to the second one, I'm gonna ask it anyways. Which one was more of like a euphoric experience for you?
Yeah, good question, and nice to meet you. Uh, I mean, in terms of euphoria and gratification, it's got to be college. Just no question, hands down. Um, I think the intensity also I found is a quite a bit higher in college, and I think there are a couple factors there. Um, One is that like all the teams in college, all the top teams know each other so well. Like you play the same teams at several tournaments throughout the years. You're playing the same guys in college. I played this against the same guys on UNC in Colorado every single year for 4 to 5 years, and it's just like you build up that sort of competitive antagonistic relationship, and at the same time you are getting so close with your teammates at college who you're living with, going to class with, eating lunch with every day, like partying with, whatever. And like every single day to your college teammates, you're like, we have to go to this lift. We have to do this. We have to do this because we have to win in May. And it's just like the tension builds over the course of the season in a way that is like it's like you can feel it physically.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't think you can really replicate that in club or UFA. Um, and UFA is, just like any sort of adult sport, people like have their own lives a little bit. And it's like a slightly less cohesive group. And so even though like, the average skill level, for example, is obviously going to be a lot higher in the UFA than in college, I think the intensity gold medal goes to college.
That's
Yeah.
what I assumed the answer was going to be, but I had to ask anyways.
There's
Yeah, good
nothing like
question.
the relationships you have with your college teammates, everybody who was a part of it meant so much. Cam, you were ahead of your time in the kind of the transfer portal for Frisbee before it became a fad because you played college soccer at one place and then went to another school and then went to a third school undergrad and then went to a fourth school for grad school, right?
Fourth and a fifth for grad school. Yeah.
You're ahead of your time. Cam,
Yeah.
thanks so much for joining us. We barely scratched the surface, but we'll chat again soon. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. Nice to
Yeah.
meet you, JR.
Yeah.
So John, as accomplished as Cam is, he doesn't really have a cut named after himself. But like people hear the Randolph cut and it's become a thing. And we actually have some footage of you in high school doing, the Randolph cut as we think of it now and how you always get open. How did this become a thing?
I don't know. I'm curious to see your footage from high school. I just know that the place that all my moves came from in high school were from like playing mini. We played mini on a tiny little field in the corner pocket of the soccer field at school after school every single day, no matter the season. And also during our practices in high school, we also played a lot of mini. Um, and I feel like it's
Look
not
at
like
this.
I
You
ever
make a guy fall down here.
uh I remember that game. That was a fun game. Um but yeah, the other thing is like in high school, when you're a handler, you just like have to get the disc and you have to be able to get a 1 yard pass every single time because frankly, you can't trust everybody on your team to be able to throw like a nice 25-yard swing to you. And it's just like you have to, turn an inch into a foot in terms of separation. Uh, so yeah, I think that's sort of the foundational part, how that got developed.
Do you uh do you I mean, I'm sure you've heard people say the Randolph cut. Is that is that a thing? Is that something that you feel like you've pioneered to get open in a small space in the end zone or in the middle of the field, wherever?
No, no, I don't think so. It's just a jump cut. A lot of people do it, and there are like a lot of different subtle variations of it, I would say. So it's not even like one. It's just like that's how people get open in the end zone.
Fair enough. Uh, it's amazing to me how your career has evolved, and I'm not really surprised by any of it because I remember watching you. I think the first time I saw you was a UFA game when you were 18 years old in 2017, Seattle against Pittsburgh out in the Pacific Northwest, and like you were the center handler on the O line. We got some footage of that right here. And then, you go to Brown and you do everything, even as a freshman and a sophomore, and now you've kind of fashioned yourself as this D-line dude that can cross over, but is leading your team to breaks. And I'm just curious how you kind of view the evolution of yourself as a player over the course of the last 7, 8, 9 years.
Yeah. Wow, you really went into the archives for all this footage. Uh, yeah, I think it's like a little bit how you said is that I think as you get to each new level, and you evolve and you grow on different teams to be the best version of the best Frisbee player you can be, you need to be adaptable. And at some point, some teams needed a D-line dog. At some point, some teams need like an O-line center handler or an O-line cutter or a goal scorer or something. And if you want to be the best, you got to be ready to adapt to whatever is going to maximize your own role on the team and the success of the team. Um, and I don't know. I've also like I don't like the mindset of people who are like, oh, I'm a pure handler or like I'm a pure finisher or like I'm a pure defender. Like I do this one thing and like that's who I am. I think like anybody who wants to be the best should think about trying to be the best at every single skill.
What was it like joining the New York Empire out of college and joining a team that was so stacked and so experienced and just had so much credential? And obviously you come in with your own established resume already and the ability to be an impact player. But like what was it like finding, your place amidst all the other personalities on that team when you first joined New York?
Yeah, it was definitely interesting, and it wasn't really something I was planning on doing like immediately after college until like I had a call with the owner and the coaches and maybe some other people I forget, and they're like, "Yeah, you can, join after the end of the college season, and we'll like try to figure out how to fit you in." Um, and so I just kind of fell into it, and I was definitely a little bit apprehensive just because, as you said, there are so many great players already on the team. I was like, I don't know what my role is going to be. I don't know if, guys are not going to like if I come in halfway through the season and either I do get a bunch of playing time and that rubs people the wrong way, or like I don't get playing time and that rubs me the wrong way. But everybody on the team was so welcoming. They're very focused on having the team win, and everybody's pretty selfless in that regard. They're fine giving up playing time. They're just like, we want to find a role for you. We want to maximize you. Um, so that was a pretty good mentality of a team to come into.
We talked to Jack a couple weeks ago on the show, and he was really honest and said he hadn't really thought a whole lot about 2025. He's just enjoying his off season right now. He talked about the value of the transition year that the Empire kind of went through this year, and the growing pains and the evolution, and there was a lot of good in there. How would you characterize what this past 2024 season was like for you and the Empire? Certainly different than the previous two, and have you begun to think about 25?
Yeah, I mean, this last season was pretty painful. We did a lot of losing. We didn't perform how I wanted us to perform. Um, we wanted to sort of evolve and grow into our new role with our new players and new systems and still win, and we failed. Um, but I like Jack, I haven't thought too much ahead about 2025. I'm mostly focusing on like my own rehab and recovery and just being able to be ready and be in fighting shape when the time comes. But I think it's just going to be another bite at the apple, another chance to like look at all the pieces we have, whatever pieces those turn out to be, and figuring out how we can maximize them.
Obviously, the East Division is super strong. We're going to talk with Jacques here shortly. It feels like, you play Boston or DC, big rivalry games, both of them, and both with your old college teammates on the other side of the field. What's that dynamic like? With your best friends from college, you just talked about how intense and how meaningful all those were, and now your adversaries in certain cases. What's that like?
Uh, it makes the wins that much sweeter and it makes the losses that much more crushing. So hopefully I never lose to them again because that's the worst feeling.
What was it like competing against Jeff Babbitt this year, as when he joined the Boston Glory?
It's interesting. He's a fearsome dude. Um, and Jeff is obviously a special player. He's obviously a unique player, and you have to game plan for him specifically. And we thought that we would be able to do that pretty effectively because obviously we know him quite well. We know him better than everybody, and we couldn't really do that to the effect we wanted to. Um, so from sort of an intellectual perspective, I think it was a really interesting problem. And we'll have that problem again next year. So hopefully we can solve it.
Why do you think you couldn't crack the code? I mean, obviously he's a special player, as you said, but what did you try to do and why didn't it work?
A lot of our focus revolved around getting, when we played Boston, getting the disc to some of their guys on their team who we thought would turn over. And the turnovers were coming from a slightly different set of guys, and the turnovers were just not coming from them as much as we thought they would be, or as much as they did in past years. And I think we also just didn't have the right matchups for Jeff.
Yeah, it's hard to find that matchup.
Yeah, if you know somebody, let me know.
Yeah. Well, you we know the Empire will be back, and we're looking forward to seeing what they look like. The Empire had bragging rights over the Breeze for a very long time, and you had bragging rights over Jacques for a very long time, and last year that flipped, and I've been excited ever since the Live with Lep concept returned to get you and Jacques on the screen at the same time, and see your guys' faces together. I mean, what are these New York DC games like, and how have you coped with the crushing losses from 2024, John?
Uh, I mean, how are the games? The games are intense. The games are really fun. Um, it kind of goes back to my earlier point about like in college you build up relationships against your opponents too, and I think that's as much true as it could be within the UFA in terms of New York versus DC. Like I think the two teams know each other very well, and it's like two boxers who have fought 20 times. You know, you go in and you know it's gonna be a fight, and you can feel viscerally because you remember like what the blows felt like last time. And so even if you win, you know it's gonna hurt and you're gonna take some punches. Um, so yeah, it's a grind. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's what came to
Yeah,
mind.
good deal. Last question I'll ask you. What was your first impression when a freshman named Jacques showed up to Brown University?
Oh, I have a good memory here. The first time I ever met Jacques, we were uh he was visiting Brown actually. I think he had not decided whether or not he was going to come. And he came and visited a practice. This would be probably in spring 2018 or 2019 at some point anyway, and he visited and he we were playing some scrimmage. He was playing in practice, and I was like, "Oh, this hotshot high schooler thinks he's so cool." And then he like I was guarding him or he was guarding me, and like a deep floaty ball went up, and the whole time I was running it down, and I was like, "I cannot let this guy sky me. He like I'm never gonna live it down. He's never gonna come to Brown. I'm gonna feel so horrible." Um, and I think I jumped at the right time and I got up first, but I was like so in my head that I like dropped it and I was like, ah, uh, and then yeah, so I guess that's my first memory of Jacques. And then from there, you know, obviously we talked and became friends, and yeah, that was the start.
Jacques, do you remember that disc floating in the air?
I don't. I definitely remember the practice, and I remember graciously offering John a ride back to campus after practice, which he neglected to mention.
Oh
But
yeah.
I remember having a blast, and yeah, that was my junior year, so hadn't made any decisions, but loved the time I spent with the guys on a terrible field in terrible conditions for 3 hours. But yeah.
Jacques, when you went to that practice as a junior in high school, did you feel like you belonged on that field even at that young age?
Yeah, I think so. I think like skills wise, I thought I definitely belonged, and the team made such a concerted effort to welcome me from the start of practice that I socially felt like I belonged as well, even though there was no reason for that to be the case. I had guys, I felt like I was the center of the discussion at warmups. I was kind of going along for the ride, and the 3 hours went by just like that.
Good deal. Before we let JR go, I want to ask Jacques with John here, like what stood out most to you about the New York DC games this year compared to previous years? And obviously, there's the no Jeff Babbitt, no Ryan Osgard, no John Lithio. New York lost a lot of good players for that. DC did too. Christian Boxley was a really good player. He wasn't around this year. Lauren Boyle, obviously a new coach. I don't know if your mind goes there first. What was the difference in 2024 for the Breeze?
Well, I was not at the first Breeze New York game, which was in DC early in the year. So I only played in the second one. And the biggest change there was the location. It was played in Connecticut and not New Rochelle. So I think that already changed the atmosphere behind the game. I think with a lot of previous New York DC matches, every time we drive up to New York, like the games, like John said, they always feel very similar. There's a lot of like we've been here before. This is what it's going to feel like. We feel like we get a break. New York gets a break. It feels like, oh, like we've been here before. But in Connecticut, it all felt a little different. And it was obviously the first time we'd beaten Empire away from home, at least in the last 5 years. Um, I know. So I know there's more work to be done, and I still kind of feel that monkey on my back in the sense that we haven't beaten them in New York proper since I've been on the breeze, at least.
I'm
And
sure.
never will.
Okay.
That's why I wanted to keep you here, John. I knew you'd have a chirp at some point. John, thanks so much for doing this. I appreciate all the discs you have on your wall behind you. That's a cool setup, especially on a call like this. Have a very happy holidays, and look forward to seeing you in 2025. Thanks, John.
Yeah, thanks, you too.
Cool. And Jacques Nissen, thanks so much for being here as well. I was just rereading some of the conversation that we had during the pandemic, and that's also on watchufa.com right now. Disc in a chat with Jacques Nissen, and your first ever UFA game, you had just turned 18. You were on the O line. You're playing New York. You're being guarded by Jeff Babbitt and Marquez Brownlee and other dudes that you like. We've talked about it but for those viewers who haven't heard you talk about it before. What do you remember about your UFA debut as this young kid who just showed up mid-season? Obviously, you had gone through a little bit of preseason stuff, but you hadn't played in the first 5, 6 games, and then it's June 1st, and you're playing against the Empire.
Yeah. So this was in 2019. So I think this was the first Empire championship year. So I didn't have necessarily the like championship aura around them that they have in the past couple years. So I wasn't really thinking too much about that. And I remember getting off to a hot start. I think I scored or assisted our first 4 goals of the game. And as a team, we got off to a hot start. And then I think around mid-game, they started putting bigger matchups on me. So Marquez was one of them, and then also Babbitt. And at first, I was pretty confused. I was like, "Huh, I don't know why." Like, I still feel like I'm getting open. I still think it's working for me at least. And then we turned one throw, and immediately Babbitt just sprints deep, and I'm backing him the whole time, and still the throw goes up. And then right then and there, I realized, oh, this is the game plan. So he easily skies me. It's a break. And afterwards, Daryl was like, that's all they're going to do on a turn. So be ready. I was like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready. I don't think it happened again. And they made a crazy comeback and won the game in the fourth. But yeah, that's what I remember at least.
Were you nervous going into that game, or did you feel pretty comfortable even though you were just 18?
Um, I don't really remember. I do remember that I was coaching middle schoolers for like 4 hours leading up to the game. So I was like at least on site for 4 or 5 hours. Um, and maybe that helped my nerves a little bit, but I don't remember feeling that nervous.
You talk about the practice with Brown when you were a junior in high school and you still didn't know where you were going. What were the other options for you coming out of high school as clearly an accomplished player who was already playing in the UFA, and what ultimately led you to Brown?
Um, so I wouldn't say any other options truly formalized like at the top of the list, but I was definitely wanted to stay relatively close to home. So I was thinking about East Coast. So I toured like the Southern Atlantic coast, like toured the William and Mary's, UNC, Duke. I kind of toured that area of the country. Um, Also was applying to some of the bigger North Central schools like Wisconsin, Michigan, Northwestern. So I think kind of one of those areas of the country would have been most likely. But I applied to Brown early and got in early, so I really never even got the chance to consider another option.
And it all led to the footage that we're seeing here, your Callahan video from this past year, and you didn't win the Callahan, but you got the title that you really definitely wanted, which is college champion. Um, I mean, man, we could go so many different places from this year's Nationals, which was a crazy freaking experience with all the starts and stops and the weather. That game you had against Georgia was just such brutal conditions and on an off field, and it's a game I'll never forget watching on the sidelines, trying to stay dry under an umbrella. What are the lasting memories from 2024 college nationals where you helped lead Brown to another championship?
Um, I think the level of comfort that we felt in the bracket is a lasting memory. Um, like we just kind of felt at ease and extremely confident in our abilities in our most important games of the season. And I don't think I could have said that of us earlier in the year. I think doubt certainly existed at like our early regular season tournaments. Um, but I just have this lasting memory of like feeling like everything was going to work out. And it did in semis and finals. Um, and whenever I go back and watch the tape, I also just like think very fondly of all the practices that went into that nationals, and the people that I share those practices with, because those people I obviously don't see as much anymore. But it is fun to go look back at the tapes and just reminisce.
And I mean, throughout your career, you have kind of gone from college nationals, and then a week later, your Breeze jersey's back on. What's that transition like? The intensity of college nationals to regular season UFA. Obviously, professional games against good teams and tough battles, but it's a different vibe for sure.
Yeah. I mean, my first 3 years of college, I was coming off rather heartbreaking loss in college nationals, and I viewed the next week's UFA game as an opportunity to just like you know get off the snide and play again. Um, this year, I'm trying to think. I don't know if I had a game immediately after. I remember having some like downtime of sorts after college nationals, so I don't recall too much, but it is like the start of a new season. I see my club teammates and UFA teammates who I haven't seen for 6 months. Um, so it kind of just feels like a homecoming, like come back to DC, seeing people again, and that's kind of the primary thought. And then the game just the games come by real quick. Like it feels like never do you play a game 1 week into a season, but for me that's what it's been, and I'm very grateful just to be able to hop in mid-season and pick up with these teams just immediately.
And the Breeze had their most successful season ever, obviously, winning the East, getting to the semifinals in Salt Lake City, and then you show up and the wind is gusting and it could not have gone according to plan. Uh, what do you remember about those throwing sessions, on that Friday before the game, realizing that this was going to be a different sport than ultimate frisbee that we're accustomed to?
Yeah. We came to the fields Friday morning for a throwing session. I remember throwing with Johnny. And we take turns throwing upwind, throwing downwind. Disc was definitely doing weird things, but at the time I was like, okay, like windy game, like, had this experience at college nationals recently, like here's how we're going to do it, yada yada yada, trust the small ball. And then I think Minnesota had the first O point of our game. And I think the way they were playing offense really just like threw us for a loop, because it was clear they came into this with a mindset that the win was the primary thing, and they were changing their strategy a lot around the wind. Well, we were kind of going into the game. While we were thinking about the win, we were primarily thinking about playing our offense and how we're going to do that regardless of the wind. And by our second O point, it devolved into into field position, and it was kind of like a constant battle of what do we prioritize in terms of field position and throw choice and all that.
Yeah. I mean, I remember seeing folks on the Breeze at the hotel that night after the game and the next morning in particular, and felt like a lot of people on the team took that loss hard. Like it was, you all expected to win, for obvious reasons. As the team that won the East had been the champion the past couple of years, and it had a great regular season, and it just didn't work out. So, in the aftermath of that, what are your thoughts on, going through the grind again in 2025? Obviously, this season will be different for you because you don't have a college season to play. I don't know what your, job is like and how busy you are, and if you're planning on playing 12 games, and that's all to be determined in the future. But give me a quick thought or two about what the Breeze 2025 journey, will look like in terms of avenging that loss and getting back and getting to where you ultimately want to go.
Yeah, I'm personally really excited to have a full season. I haven't been to Breeze tryouts since the first year I tried out for Breeze. So I'm excited to be out there in February with the team, um, and get those early season reps. I do understand, like, the East Division is tough every year, and I think we were very proud to make championship weekend last year, and I don't want us to lose that feeling that making championship weekend is such a blessing, and it's so hard to make it there. But we do have our sights set on more than just reaching championship weekend. We do want to win the whole thing. Um, and I can't wait for the schedule to release to circle certain games. Um, I can't wait.
Good deal. Well, we're looking forward to it as well, obviously. The next guest on the show is a guy that you used to be teammates with, uh, Joe Merrill of the Salt Lake Shred. Jacques, you were a veteran, like 20 years old on the team in 2021 when Joe showed up. What do you remember from meeting and seeing Joe and welcoming him onto the O line?
I mean, Joe is incredible. I think back then we also had Joe Richards, um, and Joe formed the J&J Roofing Company, as we called them. And my only regret from that season is not throwing Joe more hooks, because it seemed like every time someone threw one to him, right here we see Johnny throwing one, they just kind of worked out. Um, Also, just the nicest guy you'll meet. So, Evan, the pleasure is yours to be able to talking to this guy today.
I appreciate that. Joe, thanks for being here. Did the Breeze throw you enough hucks in 2021? Because they all talk about the small ball.
And it was definitely a skill that I lacked. Um, but anytime they threw me a hug, it felt nice.
How did you have to cut for the different huckers on the Breeze offense differently? If it was Johnny with the disc or Jacques with the disc or Rowan or whoever.
Yeah. Honestly, it was a little different cutting for any of them, just because they were very elite throwers. Um, and obviously each person has their distinct throwing style. I think Rowan and Jacques, their discs kind of, there's a very nice shape to them. Not that there's not a nice shape to the other people throwing, but they just have a very nice outside in shape. It's really easy to read. So love doing that. Johnny is super powerful, and I don't know how he does it, but sometimes I don't think his discs go above 12 feet, and they just go the length of the field that powerfully and that quickly. So obviously I'd cut a little bit later for Jacques and Rowan, and they'd set it out for me. With Johnny, I had to just start sprinting and hope I was fast enough.
When you guys played the Breeze, when you were as a member of the Salt Lake Shred, played the Breeze in the season opener this year, Jacques was still in college, so he wasn't with the team. But I know you're known as a nice guy. Were you talking trash during that game, Joe?
No, absolutely not. I could never talk trash to the Breeze. I talk trash to other people, but but I could never do it to the Breeze. There's a special place in my heart for everybody on that team, and the coach. I mean, Daryl Stanley, but also Coach Boyle and everybody. They're something special.
Jacques, just to let you know, I mean, historically, Joe has always played on the Breeze in even or in odd years, 21 and 23. So, I mean, are you guys recruiting him back? He's due to return in 2025, right?
We'd love
Well,
to have
I
him regardless of his injury status. So, Joe, the door's open. The Breeze House is calling your name. We got spots.
I like to
Thank you.
state for the record, I'm not trying to tamper or cause any consternation in your brother from another mother, Bryce Merrill's household right now.
No,
Jacques, thank you so much for being here. We'll let you go and appreciate your time and perspective. Happy holidays, my friend.
Thank you.
Yeah,
see you, Doc.
thanks, Jacques. Uh, Joe, it's great to see you. How are we feeling? How's the knee? What's the past several months been like? As the fall, I'm sure, has been different for you after getting hurt late in the UFA season.
It's been difficult, honestly. Um, it's so I at work I'm an athletic trainer, and so I do see a lot of these injuries. I see torn ACLs and I see big knee injuries, and it's just like, oh yeah, dude, you'll be fine. Like this isn't anything. Here's your PT. You'll go through it. But going through it is definitely a different beast altogether. It's very humbling to go from, I could run the length of the field to I can't walk normal. I can't jump 6 inches off the ground on one leg. Just doing some of those really basic movements, and really exciting when I do get, that 6 inch jump and I land. And I'm like, oh, I just did that. I ran for the first time today. Those days makes all the other days seem a lot more in the past, I guess. They kind of fade away, and you remember the good times.
Joe, we're not going to stir up really bad emotions if we show what happened, the highlight from the end of the Portland game, right?
Absolutely not. I doubt
Okay.
anybody can tell even what I did.
Well, it was just so strange because the game is over, you guys are in control, it's late, the clock's winding down. Talk me through what happened here.
Well, so that whole game, I had not been feeling well. Looking back on it, I probably shouldn't have been playing. I believe I had heat exhaustion, and was just too dumb to realize it and pull myself out of the game, which, as an athletic trainer, I feel incredibly stupid for doing that. But yeah, it was a simple cut. I mean, I've made that cut for Kerr, I don't know how many thousand times, through the college and UFA career and everything. Um, it is very unfortunate that I missed it. I mean, I was a little ticked off at that, bounced out of my hand. But then I landed only on my right leg and my knee just gave out. And I'd never experienced something like that. I'd never imagined something like that happening, and felt some twists and pops and all the good stuff that you never want to hear. um, and yeah, it was a pretty devastating moment. I think deep down I knew what had happened and that this injury was bad enough that I wouldn't be playing again for a bit. Um, yeah.
What has been kind of the happiest moment of your training, recovering, recuperating process since that moment?
Again, this is slightly embarrassing, but running 9.5 miles an hour uphill for a whole minute. I mean, it's really it was amazing getting the brace off and being able to walk around without crutches. But being able to run again was just such a liberating feeling.
When did that happen?
About 4 weeks ago.
Okay. And is
So
the knee feeling okay? Like, how does it feel? I've never torn my ACL, knock on wood.
I hope you never do. This is not something I'd wish on anyone. The knee feels good. I unfortunately did not only tear my ACL. There's a couple other good structures that I tore as well, which are definitely slowing my recovery. And for example, my knee's still a little swollen. A lot of times, if it's just an ACL, the swelling goes down after a couple months. I'm here now about 5 months out and still swollen. But you work through it and you trust your PTs and you do what they say and it gets better.
I mean, people say that like doctors make the worst patients. How are trainers like you at dealing with PTs and folks that are trying to help you recover?
I Most athletic trainers are not good. They're which I again, if you're an athletic trainer watching this, hit me up because you know it too. Um, so a lot of athletic trainers do not make good patients. I have tried to break that, and believe have so far succeeded. My physical therapists are always surprised when I say, "Okay, what else can I do?" And they're like, "Are you doing everything?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course I am. You said to do it." Like, really? Um, but yeah, trying to change that stigma. But definitely, athletic trainers are not easy to give exercises and rehab to.
All right. Let's stop with the injury. Let's just talk about Frisbee. You've had this unique path where you've played for the Breeze, the Shred, the Breeze, and then the Shred again. What has that been like bouncing back and forth between those two teams? How would you compare and contrast those two teams in terms of like the team vibe, what it's like being a part of DC versus Salt Lake?
Yeah, that's a fun question. So I'm sorry if I'm talking too long. I love both of the teams. DC, again, as I said before, it has a special place in my heart. I loved how just immediately welcoming everyone was. I remember I hadn't even moved out there yet in 2021, and I got a message from Stephen Mortonby, shout out. Um, and he was just like, "Hey, dude, heard you're coming out. You're going to be new to the area and everything. I moved recently. I don't know how recently it was, but, let me know if you need anything." And it really hit me. I was like, man, these guys, they're really, really nice. And I don't play on Sunday for religious reasons. Nobody had an issue with that. I don't think Daryl Stanley even batted an eye. He was like, okay, cool. Sick. This is great. Um, and everybody, again, just so welcoming, so loving. And again, it was just really, really nice to play with them. Love the owner as well. Well, the majority, I don't even know how it all works. All the owners that I've had out there were amazing. Ty, especially. Out here in Salt Lake, it definitely has a different vibe. We don't have as many, elite handlers. I think it's safe to say. A lot of huckers, but not elite handlers. In that small ball and everything, it is definitely different. A lot of bigger cuts on Salt Lake, which I think play to my strengths. And there's definitely a feeling of, hey, we have to work hard. We're playing with a chip on our shoulder because we are a new team, and we have to work hard and kind of outwork other teams in order to be as good as they are, and in order to beat them and everything. And I love that sentimentality as well. And I love the idea of like, hey, let's work hard. Great, let's work hard. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. The teams are amazing, though. They're just something else.
I mean, there's obviously a lot of talent on both teams,
Oh yeah,
high expectations, also really good fan bases and stadium
yeah,
atmospheres and like different stadium atmospheres. And I love to ask players like what's one memory with a fan like before, during, or after a game that stands out? Can you give us one from DC and from Salt Lake?
yeah. DC, a kid came up to me and asked for my autograph. And I'm so really sorry, I don't remember his name, but that was the first time anybody had ever asked my autograph. And he had a disc and he wanted me to sign it. And I was like, are you kidding me right now? This is insane. And I have a picture that somebody took of that moment. It was great. Another, if I could say one more from DC. As I said before, I'm religious, and I got the missionaries for the church to come to a game with some of their friends, and they're these. You have the younger missionaries who are 18 to 24-ish, right? And then there are the senior missionaries who are older couples, retired typically, and they got a group together as well. That was hilarious, just because they were all sitting there in white shirts and ties at a Breeze game. It was really fun. then, and obviously family. Family is great. They're both places. In Salt Lake, it's really fun seeing high schoolers at the games and knowing some of the high schoolers and actually being able to interact with them at some of the shred camps. And there's one in particular, his name's Evan. He's great. We have this tradition now after every game, I pick him up and carry him. After I tore my ACL, he picked me up, and he's great, but it's just so fun seeing the high schoolers and kind of as they progress into playing for the shred. And it's just a really fun transition to see. And the little kids running around. There are so many little kids running around at shred games.
There's a pretty good pipeline for the future of young Utah talent. It's 1 minute past the top of the hour, but I got a couple more quick questions for you. What is your goal in terms of a timeline to return to the field? I know you'll wait till you're ready, but are you hopeful of playing in the season opener by mid-season? Are you going to sit out this whole next year? What's the plan, Joe?
I will take this next year off. I will be helping Bryce and the coaching staff as an assistant coach. And so I'm very grateful for that opportunity to still contribute. However, with how bad I hurt my knee, I wouldn't really be coming back until the end of the season, 2 games left. And I'm not the type of person to watch somebody do all the work to get to that point in the season and then kick them off. And I would rather watch them succeed and try to help them succeed. And so that's kind of the plan. Bryce actually approached me with that idea when we'd kind of figured out the timeline, and I am really looking forward to it. However, in 2026, I'm looking forward to being back on the field and skying some people.
I bet. Well, I'm sad to hear that you won't be on the field at all next year. That's a bummer. But you're still part of the team, and the team's still going to be good, and perhaps playing with a little fire after how 2024 ended. As a member of the coaching staff now, I mean, what are your thoughts on what needs to shift as you move toward 2025 to achieve the goals that eluded you this past season?
Honestly, I think the biggest shift that we need to make as a team is in our mentality as we approach games, as we approach, especially later on in the season, making sure that we're taking care of ourselves and not getting burned out. I think that happened for a lot of players last year. And so, honestly, I think the main change needs to happen between our years. And that is something on a personal level, as each individual player needs to make that change, as well as a group level, and what our focus is as a team, as a group, and supporting each other and going from there.
It'll be a very interesting season, and it's I sort of think of you and Bryce as like family just because you have the same last name, but I know you're not related, right?
We actually are. We're like third cousins, twice
Oh,
removed or something. We have the
I didn't
same great grandfather.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, look
Cool.
at that.
Cool. Well, that
Yeah.
explains the how you're both so affable, I guess. Um,
Thanks.
Joe, thank you so much for doing this and sharing your tough, painful memories from the season that was, but also bringing your upbeat, positive smile and energy. It's fun to have you on the show, and excited to see you on the field in 2026, but on the sidelines helping out, making things happen. And I look forward to talking frisbee with you again soon. So happy holidays, happy new year. Keep getting better, and thanks so much, man.
Will do. Thank you for the opportunity. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, great stuff. Merry Christmas and a happy new year. We will be off next Wednesday night. It is Christmas. We will be off the Wednesday after that. It is New Year's. We will be back on January the 8th with a tentative lineup that includes New York's Marquez Brownlee, Philadelphia's Sean Mott, Colorado's Alex Atkins, and Seattle's Garrett Martin. That is going to be a fantastic show. Looking forward to it already, but that is 3 weeks away. Thanks so much to my guests tonight, Cam Brock from the AlleyCats, John Randolph from the Empire, Jacques Nissen from the Breeze, and obviously Joe Merrill from the Shred. Thank you as well for watching, and one final thank you to our producer extraordinaire, Luke Johnson, pushing the buttons behind the scenes. This is fun talking Frisbee in the darkness of the off season. There's plenty of news coming out early in 2025. That's going to be fun to see, and that includes the schedule, which is, I know, being worked on right now. So, thanks again for watching. I'm Evan Lepler. This has been Live with Lep. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. See you in 2025, everybody.